Hello and welcome to another video. Today I'd like to talk about something that I think is pretty common in the art community, which is hero worship. I think it's a risky behaviour that a lot of younger artists engage in, and I think it can stunt artistic development. Though sometimes it can have some upsides, which I want to talk about as well. So you'll recognise the feeling of wanting to basically step inside of someone's artistic skin suit to inhabit their style, the way that they paint, maybe even the projects they've worked on. Like, you're really quite envious of that. You want to do the things that they've done in the way that they've done it. You admire it so much. But those people didn't do that themselves, right? So there's a way that people became good enough for you to worship them as a hero, and they didn't worship someone else as a hero, right? So if you think that worshipping, I don't know, Zach Retz as a hero is going to make you as good as Zach Retz, that's sort of counterintuitive to me. Maybe we should look at what Zach Retz did to become so good and do that rather than just copying him. So sort of dig that one level deeper. The main problem that I see with the worship of another artist and just trying to emulate and copy everything that they do is that I don't really know where it leads. So if all your goal is to copy someone else and sort of emulate their style and the way they paint and whatever else, you're only ever going to be a slightly worse version of them. I think we forget that even our heroes are improving. They're still studying, they're still learning, they're still getting better. And so for every hour I spend trying to copy Jamidra Obayev, for example, he's spending hours and hours doing even more new stuff and interesting stuff and sort of carving his own path out rather than copying someone else. So you're always going to be one step behind, if that makes sense. And in that way, you know, why would people hire you when they can hire the actual artist, the person that you're copying? Maybe because they're on a budget and they don't want to spend quite as much money. That would be my cynical view of it. Now, saying that, there's a benefit to copying another artist. Effectively, when we think about what we might refer to as artistic style, what we're talking about is a person's decision making in the face of artistic problems. So we could be presented with a visual problem. Let's say that we want to paint a tree and the foliage is being sort of dappled and cast in light with the other half in shadow. Okay, it's a bright sunny day. That's a visual problem that needs to be solved, and there are so many solutions to that visual problem that it can be very difficult to know which one to go for, right? You could paint every individual leaf in high fidelity. You could use a big textured brush. You could actually use a photo texture. You could open up a 3D program and try and start working on it in that. And it can be overwhelming. So looking at ways in which other artists have solved that visual problem can be really useful. You can go, right, I see Zach Retz has actually done it this way. Well, that seems like a good idea. Maybe I can try that. That's really useful, really helpful for when you're starting out, but it only takes you so far. I think a lot of the learning that gets done later on in your artistic development is from solving the problems yourself, is from going, here's a visual problem, I don't understand it, I'm going to try 10 different ways to paint this thing, and I'm going to see which one I like the most, how they change in terms of how long they take. You know, maybe some are more efficient than others, but there's a drop off in terms of accuracy or how it looks. And you can start almost treating it like you're a mad scientist and experimenting and figuring out these things, and you'll find that you improve quite quickly. This is what other artists have done, right? Again, the way that Zach Retz might choose to paint a tree is almost completely unique to Zach Retz, and so you can tell that he didn't get it from just copying the way that someone else does something. He's really digged deep and found his own solution to that problem, and this is what makes him so unique and so interesting. You know, the people that we admire, again, we admire them because of their unique approach to these things and the way that they solve these problems. So, speaking about the problems, why stick to one anyway? Why only ever approach things in one particular style? You might say, well, because you enjoy it. That's fair enough. I feel that it's actually a lot more useful, especially professionally, to understand multiple approaches to these problems so that you can sort of use those solutions interchangeably depending on who you're working for, the project you're working on, just what you want to get out of the image. You know, one day I might represent a tree one way, and that's like a little, almost like a hack or a trick or something, where it's like I know that I can use this technique and I'll get a pretty convincing tree. But another day I might want to get a completely different look for that tree, and I don't want it to look like that original method. So being able to paint things in different ways is really, really useful. And this brings me on to my next point, which is a lot of the time people can treat this artistic shorthand, these solutions to problems, as dogma. They can treat it as effectively rules that you have to follow. Oh, if you want to paint a face this way, here's this one thing that's going to help you paint a face, and you follow this rule and you get a face 100% of the time and it's perfect. Those rules, they're not really rules. They're more like loose guidance. That's how I would view them. A lot of the time you could present me with compositional rules would be a great example. Rule of thirds. Yes, we tend to line things up on the thirds of canvases, right? But if you stick to that dogmatically, like it's a rule that cannot be broken, and every time you do a painting, things have to line up on third lines on the canvas, well, all of your paintings are going to start looking quite similar for a start. But it doesn't have to be that way. I'm sure I could dig into my folder of master paintings and find some examples of paintings that are placed really weirdly, like figures are on, you know, 1/5 of a canvas instead of the third lines, and I'm sure they're really beautiful and interesting. And so I think that the rules, they're useful. Again, we all understand that rules are useful and they help beginner artists sort of navigate a lot of the difficulty of painting and things to begin with, but at a certain point you have to begin to think about throwing them away. You know, take them into account slightly, have them in the back of your mind, but try and challenge them. Try and say, oh, I'm not going to follow this rule. I'm not going to paint the way that another artist has painted exactly. I'm going to try something completely different. Because that's where the magic happens. That's where we find all of this juicy information. And it's where we find our own artistic voice, right? And is that not the goal of every artist? I think so. I think every artist wants to have their own artistic voice. It all comes back to that same point. Why do we worship our heroes? Is it for their technical skill? Maybe, but there's so many technically skilled artists out there that I think why you're actually worshipping the artist you are is because of their unique approach to solving a visual problem. We can find our own unique approaches to solving visual problems. Just this example that's here at the moment. You know, the way that I paint has developed over 6 or 7 years now of, yes, studying other people. I really, really like Craig Mullins's work. I love looking at it. I'm so inspired by it. But I'm sort of tired of being called like a budget Craig Mullins. You know, I don't want to be known as the guy whose work looks like Craig Mullins. I want people to look at it and go, oh, that looks like Morrow's work, right? My own thing. And so a whole load of studying should not just be copying other people's work. You can do too many master studies. It's something that I definitely think you can do. You should balance it out by painting from life, so you're sort of making your own decisions based on what you see around you, painting from photographs, whatever else, without worrying too much about someone else's thing. Style's quite intuitive, and it happens and develops over time. You can see some sort of magic wizardry going on with curves at the moment. This is something that I just figured out by playing around, messing around in Photoshop, using all sorts of different tools, etc. Down in the description there is a link to the Patreon, where we hold critique sessions. We've got an exclusive Discord on the Patreon where I give paint overs and all sorts of other things. We do spit paints in there. And there's also a link to the public Discord server, which you can join, check out. Loads of people hang out in there, post work, get feedback from each other. It's really cool. So check both of those out, and I hope you have a lovely day.